Anyway, welcome. I guess a few of you may have some issues with some royal pains, huh? In the wedding industry? No way. All our clients are super cool and relaxed, right? Okay. Well, you'll notice that from your necklaces that I have themed this as a throwback to the 70s because I really believe that the way to handle a royal pain is with peace, love, and understanding. And the thought process behind that, though, I want to caution you, is I'm not suggesting that you become a pacifist. I'm not suggesting that you roll over and do anything that any one of your clients want. I can tell you that, though, by gaining an understanding, by looking at things from other people's perspectives, you can, first of all, hopefully, understand what their needs are and avoid someone becoming a royal pain. If someone does and it gets nasty and ugly, you can diffuse that royal pain. But even more importantly, if there's someone out there who intends to do you harm as a client, with all the things that can go on in social media and legal action, maybe you have some insight. Maybe you get a good warning in advance and you start to listen to the little things, the bells and whistles that go off in your head and make you not have them as your client to begin with. So these are all things that we're going to discuss. And I want to start by telling you my story, my journey into this evolution of peace, love, and understanding. It was a dark and stormy night, Saturday night, and it was around 11 o'clock, and since I am an old married lady, I was in bed getting ready to go to sleep, but my team was out there doing weddings, and at 11 o'clock the phone rang, and I saw it was one of my planners, and I was quite concerned because I knew she was finishing up an event, and when I picked up the phone, she was sobbing uncontrollably. I thought, good Lord, what happened? Well, she had told me that, of course, it was, again, this stormy type of day, which is so common in Florida. And also so common in Florida is that our couples want to get married outside. And the weather did not look good. And the planner had to go up to the bride's suite and say, hey, listen, it's not raining now, but it looks like we're going to have to move inside, and it's just for the good of the wedding. And with much sadness, the bride agreed. So the planner got together with the assistants and went downstairs to the ballroom and began to set up for the wedding. And in 10 minutes, the groom came storming into the room. He was cursing and yelling and screaming, and he said, who's the skank I have to talk to in order to get this wedding moved back outside? And my understanding from the story is skank was the nicest thing he said in the entire conversation. And this is a hotel where we work in all the time, and you could hear this guy echoing in the hallway. And my coordinator said at one point, I was even afraid he was going to hit me. He was so imposing and so nasty. Well, while he was busy screaming at the coordinator, one of the assistants got up and walked over to him and said, hey, listen, because of the weather that we have here, it's likely that you're going to rain out. We can move you outside, but are you okay with the fact that your guests may have to scramble to come inside in the middle of the ceremony? And he said, yes. I said, and are you also okay that the photographer is not going to stand out there and get his equipment yet? He said, yes, I'll take the risk. And then finally she said, and it's likely that your musicians are going to have to move inside as well. He said, fine, whatever. So they schlepped everything back outside. It did drizzle during the ceremony, but they made it through. And the groom's family gave lots of apologies to the coordinator. They saw his horrible behavior. But she was calling me because she was really concerned that later on he was going to call and complain about our services. And you know what? I was ready for him to call. I was like, how dare you treat one of my employees or any human being that way? Can you imagine that kind of conduct? But wait, there's a surprise ending to this story. So I was lucky, because they went away for a few days on a honeymoon, so I had a few days to cool off. And I sat there, thinking about our experiences. And in the past, while we haven't had anything that bad, we have had instances where a client has been unhappy, even though we bent over backwards and went crazy trying to please them. We've had clients who misinterpreted that it was okay to text me at 2 o'clock in the morning, 9 months before their wedding, because they weren't sure if their mom should wear blush or pink. Right? All sorts of misunderstandings and maybe what our services would be. And I thought, you know what? I am tired of dealing with this. It is really frustrating. So what I normally do when I come up with a problem like this is I start doing all kinds of research. And I read psychology books and I read sales books, and I really wanted to get to the bottom of things. And I'm also very lucky because I have access to thousands of brides through chat rooms and different conferences where I speak. And I asked them, what's going on? What frustrates you in our industry? And I got some really interesting insight. So here's what it seems our clients are looking for from us. They want to feel important. Some of their biggest complaints were that they seemed like they were event number 562 of the year, and this was a general consensus, that emails weren't returned on time and phone calls weren't returned in a timely manner. So that was very frustrating to them. And then they started saying that, and we also want to feel valued. They talk all the time about how it seems like it's just a business, like hand over your credit card and great, we'll do your wedding. That it's very matter of fact. They want us to be excited for them. They want us to be as wrapped up in their weddings as they are, which is, not always easy to do, but they are looking for our enthusiasm. They want to understand what's going on. Some of the biggest things I heard were, you sign the contract and then all of a sudden we disappear. Like, even if you're not supposed to work with them for another 10, 12 months on their wedding day, they feel like they really don't have an understanding of what the process is going to be like. And then when they get nervous, they start getting anxious, and that's when the texts come in and the emails and the questioning of whether or not we know what we're doing or what's going on. And then finally, they want to feel like their opinions matter. Many of these couples mentioned that they'd go on site inspections at venues. They'd say, well, we always set up this table here and the dance floor goes here, without asking their opinion of how they want things to go, or to make a statement of, this is how I want my photographs, or this is how I photograph a wedding, here's what we're going to do. They felt like they had absolutely no input, and that was very frustrating to them. So with all of that said, I decided to do some research as to what makes people happy in their jobs, what makes people feel fulfilled. And here's what I found. It's almost exactly the same list. They want to feel important, not like we are, wedding planner 763 that they interviewed and they're just haggling for the best price, which goes into the whole idea of feeling valued. A lot of event planners and people in the industry were telling me, how can I feel like they think I'm an expert when they're trying to, at every turn, get me to lower my prices or get discounts? It's very frustrating. They also want to understand what's going on. They want to be informed of changes and maybe family issues, so they don't go out there and make fools of themselves by saying something they shouldn't. They want to be part of that process. And also knowing that their opinion matters, that when we put forth something about, the difference between pink and blush, that it actually matters, that they're interested in what we have to say. So that's great. All of these things we want seem to overlap, right? So what can the problem be? So here's what else my research came up with. The one big problem is that every single person feels like he or she is right. One of the stories I was reading, that even Al Capone, we know who Al Capone is, he sold bootleg alcohol, had mass murders commissioned, not a nice guy. And when he was interviewed at one time, he said, people just misunderstand me. I'm trying to give people what they want. I'm trying to give them fun. Okay, so everybody has this perspective that we are honest and we are just. We're not trying to be mean. We're looking out for our best interests, right? So that's all fun and games when you agree on things. But when there becomes any type of misunderstanding or disagreement, that's when a royal pain is born, right? So these things start out small. Look how cute that little royal pain is. Sometimes it's in the version of, texting at weird hours, and then maybe they're sending emails questioning things, or they decide maybe they've spent too much money and they try to get a little discount. But all this stuff builds up until suddenly you've got a giant royal pain, right? We're frustrated every time they come up on the caller ID. We're ducking under the desk so we don't have to talk to them. It's exhausting. It takes things over and it makes working miserable, right? It can ruin your whole day. One bad client can make you feel like, why in heaven's name am I even doing this? So this is what we want to avoid. And here's the one thing you need to keep in mind. It's empathy. And this is what my challenge is going to be to you, because, man, my first instinct was to take that groom down. What a horrible individual. And I could have yelled at him and screamed at him and said all sorts of things, but what was I going to accomplish by doing that? Right? My idea is, with this particular one, is get him as happy as I can and get him the heck out the door. Right? So you always want to be thinking of things through empathy. What's this other person's experience? What's this other person's perspective on the situation? So let's talk a little bit about wanting to feel important and valued. One of the biggest challenges we have in this industry is the amount of work we have to do. Right? Anybody in here feel like you have perfect, private life balance and work balance? Anyone? Not a single person. I saw one over here. That was you? Yeah, it's really hard to come by. We work and we work, and I'm lucky in Orlando. We get to do weddings like 365 days out of the year. We typically have good weather unless a hurricane decides to sweep through and destroy us. But so we get to make money all year round. I go and speak in different areas of the country, and I see that sometimes wedding season is 3 or 4 months, and you're making your entire living in 3 and 4 months, and it is like murder. You are going to work and work and work, and so you can relax in your off time. And I've seen how exhausted everybody gets, and I know it's really hard. So please don't take my advice as being, prima donna-ish, but I think there are ways to help combat that so we can have enough free time, so we can help our clients understand that we do value them, that they are important. And these little bubbles are the biggest complaints that I hear from people. It's not getting emails returned. It's not getting phone calls returned. It's misunderstandings on the contract. You said you'd do this. And this is when the frustration starts to build and they start getting aggravating to us. So here's how we're going to combat that. The first thing I always say is be true to yourself. How much work can you really do? Are you booking yourself so much? Have you discounted your rates so much that you have to work yourself to death in order to make a living? And how many of you in here are just starting your businesses or are fairly new? We've got a few of you. Okay, what I'm going to show you, I hope, is to help you come up with your pricing structure. And you know what? Even if you've been in the industry a while, it couldn't hurt for you to take a look and see if maybe you need to do some tweaks as well, if you feel like you're being overworked. So you really need to get a grip on what your expenses are. How much does it cost you to run your business? And when you look at that, it can be really eye-opening. I've actually consulted, I can tell you, with a resort in Orlando. They had me come in to help them improve their wedding program. And when we went through the numbers, they lost money every single time they did a wedding. They were paying people to get married at their resort. That makes no sense. So you have to pay attention to your expenses. You also have to figure out what you need to live on. Do a household budget. Find out what your rent is, and if you want to, or your mortgage and a car, and you want to go out for dinner every once in a while. You need to know what your salary needs to be, because those two things are your monthly expenses. That's what you have to make in order to keep your business going. That's the bare minimum that you will break even. And then you have to figure out how many weddings do you really want to do. So don't base your pricing on what your competitors are doing. Base your pricing on what you need to do. You may find that you are, extremely inexpensive, too good of a value, and you need to raise your pricing. Or you may find out that, wow, I'm really charging the heck out of things. Maybe I'm losing some clients. Perhaps I want to beef up what I'm doing a little bit, so you may want to make some adjustments. But the most powerful thing about having this knowledge is that you have the freedom to negotiate or to not. And I'll give you an example. This just happened a couple of weeks ago. We had a prospective client, mother of the bride, called one of my coordinators and said, hey, I really want to use your services. I feel like we really like each other and you're going to be great with us, but I'm really not comfortable with your fee. And she said, okay, let me discuss it with Susan. So we sat down and we tallied out the number of hours it was going to take for this event and the amount of staff we were going to have on there. And we figured, all right, we can throw her a little bit of a bone. We'll give her a little bit of a discount. So we took that many off, and all of a sudden, my phone was ringing, and it was this mother of the bride. And she says, I really like Jennifer, but I really can't spend that kind of money. And I said, I really appreciate that, and I thank you so much for calling me, but we really sat down and figured out what this was going to cost us, and I just can't send Jennifer out there to plan your wedding and have the company lose money. And she kept circling back and trying to get me to lower the price and trying to get me to lower the price. And finally she said, you know what, I'm going to have to shop for someone else. And I said, I really appreciate that. I said, if you can find someone who does our level of work and can do it for less, by all means, we certainly understand. So it's a little too soon to see if I hear back. Personally, I'd be perfectly fine not hearing back. But it gave me the confidence to be able to say, am I making a reasonable decision? Am I making a mistake by turning this away? I know I'm not, because it's going to cost me money. We might as well all play cards. I mean, why are we going out there to lose money? So that's the thing about being true to yourself, having the confidence to know what you need to make and how, and if you're capable of handling that workload. The next thing I want to say is you need to be true to your clients. We all have our own style and the way we do things, right? We cannot service every single client. And you have to have the confidence, again, to be able to say, look, we're not right for each other. And when I started writing this presentation, I spoke to one of my friends who's a photographer, and I said, hey, how do you handle royal pains in your business? I mean, you have really tricky business, making sure everyone looks great and they're happy with everything. And she says, I don't have any. I said, how is that possible? She said, I learned to not even book them. And the epiphany came to her when she had a client come in who was referred by a former client of hers. And those are great referrals, right? You almost don't have to sell them. You almost know it's a guaranteed booking. So she had the bride come in and sit down, and they were looking through photos, and the bride had this giant stack of photographs of the way she wanted her wedding photos to look. And they were highly manipulated. They had a lot of Photoshop and colors added, and it was not this photographer's style at all. It is not how she worked. And she kept trying to explain this to the bride. You're not going to be happy with my work. We cannot, I just don't do this, and I don't want you to be disappointed in your wedding photos. But the bride was insistent. So she said, okay, I'll tell you what. I'll put your date on my calendar, but before we confirm booking for your wedding, I want to do an engagement shoot with you and your fiance. Let's go out and do those photos and see what you think in the end. So she went out, they did the photo shoot, and by the time it was that they came in to look at the photos, the bride said, oh, are you able to Photoshop this? The photographer said, no, that's not what I do. And can you change this? And no, that's not what I do. And said, this is what I was trying to express to you. So how about we part as friends and let me help you find a photographer that's more of your style. And it worked out beautifully because she wound up getting other referrals from this bride. But aside from that, can you imagine the amount of negativity and frustration and aggravation if that bride had gotten photos she didn't like? Maybe my friend would have tried to Photoshop it the way she wanted it just to make her happy. How many hours of her time do you think that would have taken? What a waste of time, only to have a client that wasn't happy. So cut them off even before they get a chance to take hold. The power of no. How many of you heard the story that Adele refused to do the halftime show at the Super Bowl? Yeah, she turned it down, and she turned it down because she said, look, I'm not a performer like Beyonce. I'm not going to be able to get out there and do that kind of a performance. Can you imagine how much money and how much exposure she was saying no to? But she said, you know what? I'd be letting down my fans who know me who I am. So she said no, and I think now it's Lady Gaga. That's pretty cool. And Tom Hanks also repeatedly is interviewed, and he said his career really took off when he started saying no to projects he didn't want to do. He said he was tired of just chasing down things for the money. He wanted to be doing quality work that he would be proud of and enjoy doing. Imagine if every single day you got to wake up and truly enjoy every bit of the work that you had to do. I mean, we work so hard. Wouldn't that be a good goal to have? And finally, I wanted to leave you with this quote. This gentleman, he's the founder of Insight, and he said, every time you say yes to something you don't really want, you're actually saying no to something that you do. And to me, that was a really powerful quote because, I can tell you 100% of the time when I have not turned away a client that I knew I had no business working with, I have regretted it. Every single time. I have never once regretted saying no to someone. So something to keep in mind. So I want to be in the know, and I want my opinion to matter. For this one, I really got into some heavy-duty psychology. This is my daughter, Macy, that Sherry mentioned. Macy doesn't eat. Well, she eats grilled cheese, macaroni and cheese, and pizza with the cheese scraped off and chocolate milk. That's her diet. So I was reading some books on having, people be part of the process and understanding, and one of the books suggested that if you have her get in on making the food, she'll eat it. Great. I decided, let's try meatballs. And we went out shopping together, and she helped mix up all the ingredients and roll them into little balls and put them on the tray to cook in the oven, and sure enough, she ate it. She was so excited. She was part of it. It was something she made. People love thinking things are their idea, or that they're part of creating it. And you should always have sight of that when you're working with people. So if you have something in your contract that is a little unusual, make sure they understand it and see it, that they can contribute to whether or not, this is something that's challenging for them. And a good example of that is with photographers. On average, the photographers we work with take 6 to 8 weeks to get photos back. Well, our clients very typically are coming into Florida and getting married and then going home. And quite a few of them are having big receptions back home. So we were getting continuous complaints about, oh, I need my photographs in 2 weeks. And so the photographers were getting frantic and the clients were getting frustrated. So finally, one of our standard questions became, hey, listen, usually the photos are delivered within 6 weeks, but do you have any reason that you might need it sooner? Bring it up at front. Make them part of the process of making your procedures, and they'll be a lot more amiable to following them. So again, trying to avoid a royal pain as often as you possibly can. Just make them part of the process. So, I'm right, just ask me. Has anyone ever heard of the story of the five blind men and the elephant? This is a little story on perspective. There were 5 blind men walking down the street, and there was an animal trainer standing there with an elephant. And one of the men said, hey, we've never encountered an elephant before. Do you mind if we check this elephant out? So one of the men came up, and on the broad side, he was feeling the elephant to see what it felt like. He said, wow, elephants are big and sturdy, like a barn. It reminds me of the side of a barn. And another one of the men was hugging the elephant around the leg. And he said, what do you mean like the side of a barn? It feels like a pillar, like something out of, Greek architecture. And another one was feeling the elephant's trunk. And the elephant was wrapping his trunk around his arm. He said, no, an elephant's like a snake. It's exactly like a snake. And still another one of the men was feeling the elephant's tail, which is hairy. And he said, oh, they're hairy, like bristly. That was a surprise. And finally, the last one was touching the elephant's ear. And he said, no, they're kind of like a butterfly. It's all flappy and smooth and thin. So these 5 men just stood around arguing over who was right over the elephant. But as it turns out, they're all right. It just depends on your perspective. So keep in mind, when you're feeling like someone else is wrong, it may just be how they're coming at a certain situation. So, wow, Tarzan, hi. Okay, so let's just assume we've done everything we could to avoid a royal pain, but one comes along that we have to deal with. I want to talk to you a little bit about how you stop it in its tracks. One of the best books I've ever read about this is called How to Win Friends and Influence People. Have any of you read it? It's a wonderful book, and it helped me change my thinking on everything. I try to practice everything I read in that. I take regular notes because I think it's just helped grease the way through so many things, and it changed my way of thinking and how I handle especially argumentative situations. So I'm gonna need a volunteer, Shuri. I'm gonna call on you again because I want to ask you, who in here knows what the best way is to win an argument? Anybody have any ideas? Listen. Okay. What else? Anyone else have an idea? Sorry?
Try to see it from the other person's perspective.
Very good. Try to see it from the other's perspective. I mean, my feeling is the best way to win an argument is not to have one, no matter how right you are. And I'm going to show you why.
But I'm right, too.
Yeah, I know you're right, too, especially about this. So, Shuri, what's your favorite color?
Well, duh.
Okay,
Purple.
So it's purple. What if I told you that psychologists believe that purple is a really bad favorite color? They actually feel it's a weak-minded person has the color purple as a favorite color.
Well, anybody that knows me knows I'm pretty strong-minded, and no, purple is a very strong, regal color, so I don't agree with that.
Well, what if I told you that there's actually scientific research that I can tell you that experts believe that purple should not be a favorite color for a successful person?
Why would you want to tell me that? Why would you want to hurt my feelings?
Well, but more importantly, what if I told you everybody in this room thinks that purple is a horrible favorite color?
Well, I'm my own person, so I'm always right when it comes to purple.
Okay, so have I changed your mind? Obviously not. Have I made you?
No.
Okay. Now, how do you feel about me after having said all those things to you?
I don't know if you're my wonderful friend now. I probably wouldn't trust you because you're trying to force your opinion on me.
Exactly. So thank you you argued beautifully. Thank you. So that's my point. Even if you have facts, you know you are right. You can back it up. You have video evidence of whatever wrongdoing happened. You can talk into your blue in the face, and you're not going to ultimately change anybody's mind, right? And that's what I came to realize with my delightful groom friend, that was I going to all of a sudden make him a delightful human being? That he was going to all of a sudden walk around with peace, love, and understanding? No, the guy was a jerk, and that's the G-rated version of what I would call him. So I mean, horrible guy. So when you're in this situation, it's more important than ever to really think about empathy. And I'm going to tell you how this went down. So groom emails me back after they get back from their little honeymoon. It's an email this long with everything that went wrong, because there was so much more after the whole rain fiasco, because people build on that and it snowballs. So I did not want to email him back to respond to him. The only thing I did was I emailed him and said, hey, I'd really like to discuss this with you. Can we schedule a phone call? And I strongly suggest not trying to disarm a royal pain via email. It needs to be in person or on the phone. So we set aside a time for him to call. I also want to tell you that I had a pen and paper with me, because I like to take notes, and I never take notes on the computer because I don't want them to think, they can hear you typing. Then I'm texting or scanning Facebook or whatever. So pen and paper. And when he called, I said, hey, listen, I want you to know I appreciate you taking time to talk with me. I want to hear everything you have to say. And I'm going to be taking notes, so I just don't mind my silence, but I'm listening to what you're telling me. So he was furious. He's yelling and banging and how horrible we are. We ruined his life. We ruined the future of weddings. It was just on and on and on and on and on. And I listened to it. I didn't say a word. And when he got done, and this is the most amazing phrase ever invented, so you need to write this down or take a picture. I understand how you feel. I would have felt the same way if I were you. To me, that was acknowledging the fact, he was really mad. He really thinks that we ruined his life and that the entire universe was going to explode. I obviously think that he was ridiculous, but I can't tell him that. But I wanted him to understand that I'm listening to what he had to say, and I'm trying to understand what it is he's telling me. So I'm going to give you my 5 steps to dealing with complaints. And what you need to keep in mind is that every complaint you have, you want it to be your last, L-A-S-T. So your first step is to listen to their story. Do not defend yourself. Do not interject anything. You keep quiet and you listen. The next thing you want to do is apologize. However that apology comes, whether it be something that, to me, at least inside, I know with this phrase that I use, it's a little bit snarky because I'm not admitting that I'm wrong, so I feel like I'm getting away with something. But it is acknowledging to him that, something obviously went wrong and his feelings are valid. Solve the problem together. One of the biggest mistakes I see, and I've done it myself many times, is that we automatically feel like when we create an error, it automatically means refund them money, just start throwing money at them. And I've lost a lot of money when that hasn't been necessary. In fact, we also recently had a complaint where the couple really just wanted to be acknowledged that they were unhappy with something and wanted us to do something to change it. And that's all it took. So don't automatically go in thinking you know how to solve this, you're going to fix it. Find out what they want, because you might be surprised. It might be something very simple. And then finally, take time to follow up. I always do that in both ways. I like to follow up with the client to make sure we've addressed everything, but I also like to follow up with myself. And my whole team started making fun of me when I was talking about this, because I do have a planner. I called it my diary. They're all really young, and they made fun of me. So I like to write down when I have an interaction like this, like what went well, what could we have avoided, how could we have avoided it, how did we solve it, and what can we learn from it? And I think that's really key, because this stuff does take practice. Keeping our own anger in check, especially since, for the most part, we're selling ourselves, right? We're selling our skills, we're selling our talents. It's very personal and it hurts. But you have to be the grown-up. You have to be the one in control. Otherwise, it's just going to be a whole bunch of bashing and yelling and screaming. So we talked about listening to their story. You also want to avoid these words. These are things that make any situation worse. What do you want me to do? I can't. It's not my fault. Denying responsibility is not the way to go. But here are some really good words. Thank them for taking time to help you improve. Thank them for bringing things to your attention, for being honest with you. Make sure they understand that you're listening to them by saying, do I have this right? That's why I take notes. I want to make sure they realize. And then, pardon me? Oh, yes, absolutely. And I'm going to give you a way to get my slides as well. So if your pictures don't turn out, you'll be able to, I promise you'll get all these. Okay, everybody good? I still see cameras up, okay. And we're running low on time, so I don't want to keep you guys late. Ready? Okay. Okay, so diffusing words. Just making sure it's all about empathy. Anything you can think that would be empathetic to say to them, and making sure that they know that you're listening and you're taking responsibility. And then apologizing. And you apologize quickly. Don't hem and haw about it. Make sure they understand that you're sorry that this was their experience. Again, we're trying to avoid social media and all sorts of horrors that could be going on, right? And then solve the problem together. That was the next step we talked about. Get their suggestions, make them part of that process. And these are some words that I like to use, especially on site. If something's going on, I always like to use the let's see what we can do to turn this around. Because you want to end it quickly so they get to enjoy the rest of their day. You don't want this to be their lasting impression. So let's see what we can do to turn this around. And then again, taking time to follow up to make sure you have an understanding of the situation and what went wrong and how to avoid it next time. So I have one more. Do I have time? Oh, I do have a little more time. Sorry. There's another story I want to share with you. How many of you have heard the story about the photographer in Dallas? Her name is Andrea Polito. Okay. This to me, first of all, I'm going to share the story with you. It is everybody's nightmare. But before I start the story, I want to say I have the utmost respect for this woman and what she was able to do and go through. The story goes like this. She had a couple of clients, a bride and a groom, who signed a contract with her to photograph their wedding. So evidently she has something a little unusual in her contract. When you work with her, you get her hours on site and editing and an album. What you don't get is the album cover. She waits until the end, after the wedding. She must have some special type of cover that she uses. She has you select your photographs, and based on that, you choose a cover, and you go on from there. So these clients said they had no idea about this, that this was an absolute fraud. And we're talking $150. That's the amount we're arguing about. She said it was a fraud. They went to the local news channel. Local news loved this story. Big, awful wedding photographer, mean, nasty to these this poor innocent couple having their photos being held for ransom. The news channel picked up the story, did the story, asked for Andrea to appear on camera. She was out of town. So she sent them an email response to what it was. And it was a whole long explanation about how they did know about this. It was in their contract. We're trying to resolve it for them. And then the last two lines read something like, we pride ourselves on customer service and, we really want to make sure this works out. Well, when the news broadcasted, they just said that she wouldn't appear on camera. They declined to explain that she was out of town. And instead of going into the whole explanation that Andrea had to say, they showed the last two lines and sort of were glib about it, about her, priding herself in customer service. The story went viral. There were newspapers and news channels in the United Kingdom running this story. She was getting death threats. People went on her social media sites and were bashing her. I think someone posted on Yelp, she gave me AIDS, but her photographs were pretty good. This couple made it their mission to destroy her. And they did. They ruined her business. Well, Andrea didn't take it lying down. She took them to court. Cost her $100,000. And it just settled within the last few weeks, I think. And the court found the actions of this couple so egregious that not only did she win the case, but they're allowing her to go after them for punitive damages. So she's just now trying to rebuild her business, but it was a nightmare. I can't imagine having the stomach to deal with that. Can you imagine the stress? But my point in telling you this story is because if she were looking at things from their perspective, and I'm hiding a little tidbit of knowledge that I will share with you in a minute, if she looked at it from their perspective, might she have thought, it's $150, let's get these troublemakers out of the way and get them out the door? Also, as it turns out, the bride has a blog. And she was using this to help build up her following on her blog. So had she been forewarned about that, maybe it was someone she'd avoid. Or maybe, again, she would have handled it differently. And I'm telling you right now, I have no idea how she figured out how to handle the situation. So by no means am I saying she did anything wrong. But I'm telling you, by starting to think and look at things from other people's perspectives, you may also be able to stop someone from doing your business harm because you're getting what it is from their point of view. So just a little story, and if you Google it, it's a fascinating story to read, but it's also horrifying. And it's something we're all open to in this industry. There's no regulation over what people say about you online. Doesn't mean there aren't consequences, but far down the road, it took her quite a bit of time to start trying to get her reputation back. Better to head it off before it happens. So just to review, I want you to always, always, always think about things from other people's perspectives, right? You never know where they're coming from. You want to try and understand what they're doing. Make sure you're choosing the right customers. Price yourself in such a way that you don't have to take everyone that goes through your door. Feel comfortable being choosy and don't work with people who you don't want to work with. Make sure they're part of the process, not only when you're starting to work with them or you're negotiating with them, but make them part of the process if you have to solve a problem with them. And then always, always, always think about empathy. Then finally, if they do turn into royal pains, you always want to make sure it's the last time you have to deal with it. So you're going to listen to their story, you're going to apologize, you're going to solve the problem, and then you're going to take the time to follow up. Now finally, I told you that you could all have my slides, and I have other things that I want to send to you. In fact, I created a budget form for both personal and business, which you can download right away. If you text royal-pains, you have to have it exactly like it is on the screen, royal-pains to 44222. You will automatically get this download. I haven't been able to record. I'm going to record this presentation, so you'll have the slides as well as the things I'm saying. But Apple went through a little update and it screwed everything up, so I have to figure out how to do it. So give me a few days, but I will get that out to you. And then as I find additional information, I'll send it to you as well. And I'm always happy to be a resource. So when you register here, you'll have my email address. Feel free to send me email, ask questions, let me know how I can help you. And with that, I so appreciate you joining me this morning at 11. Thank you so much.